Emmy and Tony Award winner Judith Light is our guest this week. She is making headlines and an Emmy discussion once again for her role as Blanche Knopf in the Max series Julia. In our conversation, Judith emphasizes respect for and responsibility to every aspect of her projects, and she truly lives in gratitude for her family and her team. Please subscribe to In Her Words on YouTube so you don't miss any of our Emmy season episodes.
So nice to meet you. Huge
Nice
fans
to
of
meet you.
here. We're the
Thank you.
fangirls. So
Thank you. Oh, love that.
I
We
grew up watching you on Who's the Boss, so I'm like beside myself that I get to sit down and interview you.
You're very sweet. Thank you.
we love everything that you've done and everything you stand for. You're just such a role model for all of us. One of the questions we'll get to is in a minute. I just am so curious about that and you being in that role model space. So we love for our audience to hear your journey and how you got to where you are now. Did you always want to be an actor? Did you grow up in a creative family? And we love hearing that kind of zigzaggy path that so many people take and how inspirational it is. So can we start there? Would you share that with us?
Sure. I always knew from the time that I was really little that I wanted to be an actor. And I think my parents always really wanted to be in show business, and they never really did it. They were, you know, struggling to make a living.
Uh-huh.
And so what they did was, since I was an only child, they gave me everything that they could possibly give me in terms of their support. And then when I went to a girls' private school in Burlington, New Jersey, and it was called St. Mary's Hall. And there was a woman there named Ruth Strand, who was really the person who coached me in oratorical contests. And we did play we went and did plays in different places, and we won awards for them. And I was the head of, the president of the drama club. And so it was really one of those things that I knew I always wanted to do. And there were people around who were always there in some form to support me. And I remember this one time Ruth called me into her office at St. Mary's because she was the person who was also head of admissions. And she said to me, look, there's this brochure that I received for Carnegie Mellon University, and they have a summer program, and I think you should apply to go. And I did. And then subsequently, that's where I went for my training in Pittsburgh. And it's interesting. You say this thing that really sparks to me. It's like everybody has a zigzag career. We all think when we're starting out in any field at all, it's going to be this direct line. You're going to be, you're going to audition or you're going to do this particular thing, and you're just going to get there, and it's going to be really easy, and it's going to be simple, and it's going to be one of those things where you never veer from that. Well, at a certain point, after I left Carnegie, I had gone into repertory theater, and I was in repertory theater in Milwaukee and Seattle, and a couple of other places. And I had performed for the USO in Europe, doing Guys and Dolls. And, it's really, I thought it was going to be like, I was going to leave repertory theater, and I was going to be like, oh, I'm going to go to New York and I'm going to be a star. I mean, that's what's going to happen. And it's like, that isn't what happened. And that isn't what happens. Mm-hmm. And it took me a long time to really not just understand, but really get it. And I use that word precisely for what it actually means, which is it went in on a different level. It wasn't just my understanding, in my thinking, it was in my gut. And I got it. And it was really it was an austere moment for me to really know that that journey wasn't going to be like that. Mm-hmm. It wasn't going to be what I had imagined, hoped, wanted. It was going to zigzag. And there were going to be a lot of ups and downs. And there was a particular time where I thought, I'm going to leave the business because I don't know how to manage this. And Ruth Strand had said to me, it's difficult. You know, and a lot of people say, oh, I'm going to be an actor. Oh, it's so easy. It's like, it's hard. This is a very, very daunting, challenging career to choose.
What
And
did you
so,
find as the most challenging piece, if you don't mind me asking?
no, I don't know. Interrupt me.
Was it the auditions? Was it the, you know, obviously there was rejection, there was acceptance. What was it that you really struggled with?
It was the picture that I had that you just framed, which was the zigzag that I hadn't planned for. I thought it was just be, oh, okay. So, you know, you play Anne Frank in the Diary of Anne Frank at the Burlington County Footlighters. And it's like, oh no, you're gonna be on Broadway and be in feature films. So it was the complication of the picture in my head as opposed to what the reality was. You know, it's like you face the reality and all of a sudden you go, oh, this isn't happening. This isn't happening the way I pictured it. And there's real value in that. And there's real value in coming to grips with it. Might I also say that I have said many times before, it's like, I was also a spoiled brat. I wanted what I wanted when I wanted it, and it wasn't happening. So in some measure, it was an existential moment that I had to come to grips with, but it was also the fact that I was having a tantrum and I wanted it the way I wanted it. And when that doesn't happen, I knew that I had to shift. I knew if I was going to stay in the business, I knew I had to find a way to come to grips with it and to also I had to reframe things. I had to get a new contextual framework if this was going to be my life's work. Not my career, but my life's work. And how was I going to be the person somewhere that I knew I wanted to be, which was kind and gracious and using the gifts that I had come into this life with, and what was my purpose and how was I going to use it to be of service in some way. And that was really the moment of the waking up, that I knew that I had to, otherwise I was going to be incredibly miserable and unhappy for the rest of my life. And I was going to be on my deathbed and I was going to have an incredible amount of regret. And that wasn't how I wanted to live. I wanted to wake up, and I knew I had to wake up. And I went into therapy and I really started to investigate and unravel the pictures that I had that weren't serving me. They might have, as a young teenager to get me someplace, to have the drive and the ambition and the wherewithal, but it wasn't going to serve me as a grown-up and as an adult. You know, most people say they want to be a grown-up, but they don't want to grow up. And that was the same thing for me. So I knew that I needed to wake up in some way. And I started investigating who I was, what was I bringing to the world? How was I going to be a person of substance? So that's really what the looking at the challenge was.
And when you made the shift and started, you obviously had the work ethic and you had the passion that were, those two pieces. And so when you made this internal shift, did you start seeing the results change? Were things coming at you, and were you getting things that you in a different way? Did you start having success?
It was still the same content.
Okay.
But it was a different context. Okay. And a text shift for me is what made all the difference. I was holding it and looking at it in a different way. I was still getting rejected. Mm-hmm. I was not getting the things that I would choose to have been offered to me. I was just holding it differently. That didn't mean I liked it and it was like, oh, now this is so great. I'm so enlightened and I'm got a new context and isn't this fabulous? It was like there was still the same, the feelings would come up and I just held them in a different container. It's like there's, it's like you've got a pitcher or a vase or something, and it's like you can put iced tea in it, you can put vodka, you can put white wine, you can put red wine, you can put flowers, you can put, the content is still the same, but the context is different. I was holding it differently. And I wasn't having the consistent kind of sorrow and unhappiness and tantrum that I had been having before. So that's the shift. That's what makes the difference. And it's like, I was curious about, I was asking questions. I wasn't saying it has to be this way. It must be this way. I was saying, gee, I'm curious as to the reaction I'm having about this now. How am I looking at this? Like what, there's a different kind of an awareness. And that made all the difference. Mm-hmm. It didn't mean I liked it any better, but I was involved in an inquiry of my life. Not that my career was a piece of my life, was part of the content of my life, but it was the shift to who am I? Who am I in relation to all these other people? How am I relating to them because of the way I'm relating to myself? So it became the context of curiosity and inquiry and a looking at, a searching. And so that has really served me well.
And that the way you're describing that, as we we're reading articles and we're doing our research, that what you're describing sort of enlightened so many things that we found as we were looking and answering so many interesting questions on choices that you've made and using your voice and using your platform differently than a lot of people do. So take us then to that, to those first kind of, what do we call them, breaks, those first breaks, those first roles that you got. That
first one, say that again.
Take us then to those first roles that you got, the breaks that start happening, and where you are on stage and you are in a series. Take us through how those coming about.
I remember sitting in my parents' living room. I grew up in Trenton, New Jersey, and they had moved to New York, and my father had gotten a different job, and my mother was working elsewhere, and also in New York. And I was like, I sat down with them in the living room, and I said, listen, I am never going to do a soap opera, and I am never going to, and I want you, it's like, and my grandmother was like devoted to the soap operas. And my mother said, what would be wrong with you being on a soap opera, Judy, which is what she always called me. And I said, I'm not doing it. This is what I'm doing. And this was part of the tantrum part. This was I'm doing this, and if this doesn't happen, that's not okay, and I'm not doing it, and I'm not doing a sitcom. I was like, I held those things in a very, I guess, demeaning, patronizing context. Yeah. So of course, the universe is always listening. So they went, okay, girl, this is what's going to be presented to you. Yeah. Now, I was really on the verge of, I've talked about this a lot. I was on the verge of my unemployment was running out, and I was like, yeah, what am I going to do? And my agent called me, and she said, there's an understudy on a soap opera for a day. I said, geez, not even a part, not even an audition. You know how you get down on your knees in gratitude for what comes to you. And I was like, not in gratitude at all. So I said, no. And she said, look, it's $350 for the day, which I was like, okay, yes, I'll do it. Yes. It's like, there comes that moment. And when I got there, I saw what they were doing. I saw the way that everybody was working and how diligently and disciplined and how much fun it was, and how it's just like this. I had a whole different perspective on it, another context shift. And I looked at it and I said, oh, this is a really interesting part. Now, they were not going to give it to me, but what they did do was they auditioned. They said, I had a really lengthy dialogue with the producer. And he said, if you had this part, what would you do with it? And so I started talking about it, and the creativity of it started to move in. And I saw that a lot of the directors that were there, but many of the actors were on Broadway. Many of them had been doing lots of work in the theater. And I saw that the directors were all directors who had also been working in the theater, David Pressman and Peter Miner and Norman Hall. And I was like, this has and actors like Michael Storm and Bryn Thayer and Gerald Anthony and Erica Slezak. I was like, wait, this could be something. And one of the things that I knew that was really important for me to face was what was coming my way. So I went in and I auditioned for them, and I got the part. And I had to make the choice of, was I going to choose this? And you know that there's a wonderful book by Scott Peck, who it's called The Road Less Traveled. And I knew there was this choice point. And in that choice point was the money a component, yes. But there was something else that was resonating. And it was can you do the work and the creative work that you love to do and choose to do? Are you willing to do something that you said you'd never do? Will you let yourself change your mind? Will you allow yourself to bring something to your audience that actually would be valuable for you and valuable for them? And I knew the answer was yes. And that's what happened. And I chose to do it. And it was the same thing when I chose to leave. I met my husband on the soap, and he was the one who said to me, are you going to stay here forever? Because I was in New York, I was making money, I loved the people I was working with. And he said, if you don't leave, you will be here for forever. Not that that's bad, but what else what else would you choose?
Yeah. What's your conscious decision?
And he says, yeah, exactly. And I was very fearful. Went and he said, let's go to LA. I said, I don't want to go to LA. I don't want to go to LA. I swore to go to LA. I swore I'd never marry an actor. Also, like I've said so many times, I'm not really trustworthy about the things I say I'm never going to do. Husband is now no longer, he's a recovering actor. He is a novelist, but and a screenwriter. So, but I didn't drive, and I think I had failed the driving test twice. And I said, I don't drive. He said, you'll take driving lessons. I said, okay. So I took driving lessons.
That's my favorite question to ask New Yorkers. Do you even drive?
What?
Driver's license? I love asking New Yorkers.
I know so many New Yorkers that don't drive.
I love
it. It blows my mind sometimes.
We don't drive. We don't drive.
You need to.
I drive now. I've never driven in New York, I must say. I was with my driving instructor, and I was on the freeway, and you will love this. I turned to look at him, and he was asleep, and I was like, no, don't, like, wake up, just like wake up. I'm on the freeway, and I don't know what the F I'm doing, and I do not drive freeways to this day. I will take the surface. I don't care how many lights. I don't have care how many stop signs. I was just absolutely traumatized. I did drive in the freeway a couple of times after that, but that was like, we were not doing that. Anyway, so I said to him, I don't drive. We're not going to LA. He said, yeah, we're going to LA. And I I started auditioning for things, and I still I still had that secret that I was keeping, which was someday I'm going to make it. I'm going to make it someday in the way I want to make it. So the things that were coming to me were, I mean, I did St. Elsewhere, worked with a wonderful director, Victor Lobel. I mean, I was like, okay. And then I got this job. They called the agent. I auditioned for something, got this job. And then they called back a couple of days later and said, oh, sorry, we meant to call somebody else.
What?
Bing. I was like, okay. But you know, the universe does take care of us if we listen. And so I don't think that job ever went anywhere. But anyway, but it was like another wake up call. It was like, are you going to stay awake? Are you going to stick with the choices that you've made? So then I get this wonderful, delicious script called You're the Boss. And I'm like, okay. And when you, and I've talked about this a bit, that when you audition for things, and this was at that time in the 80s, if you got more than one offer on, not an offer, but to an audition to maybe get the job, you had to choose and put these things in a certain order. And there was a show that was being directed by a wonderful dear man who has since passed, a wonderful director named Jason Sandrich. And there was a show called Staff of Life, and it was about writers on a soap opera. Mm-hmm. And then there was this show called You're the Boss. And then there was this other one called Command 5. So I chose to put Staff of Life in first position. And then I put You're the Boss in second position. So I went into ABC and all the, corporate people and everything. And I was auditioning, and Jay was wonderful. He was like right there, nurturing, fabulous. And I thought, oh, I want to work with this man. And so I auditioned for Staff of Life. And then they called me and they said, we still want you to come in for You're the Boss. Mm-hmm. And we want you to do a video audition with Tony Danza. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen this audition, but I had the best time.
Oh,
I had the best time, and I didn't want to go in for the audition because I was afraid. I said, no, I put Staff of Life in first place. You can see that I'm not completely reliable. How can you be when you don't think clearly, when you don't have clarity, which has been my lifelong pursuit. So I go in and I audition with Tony, and I just adored him. And the director, Bill Persky, was there, and Bill is just like a genius. And so I finally got myself there. I wasn't going to go in. And I came back after the audition, and I thought to myself, and I said to my manager at the time, I said, oh, I think maybe I made the wrong choice. He said, well, there's nothing you can do. He said, apparently the folks at ABC saw the audition with Tony, and they said, oh, and Staff of Life was also ABC. And they said, no, we're gonna put her in the You're the Boss with Tony. And that's how that all happened. And I remember going in for the audition, and I said to myself, you can be creative in this. You can have a wonderful working relationship with all of these people. And I went in and I read one scene in the audition, and I thought the script was so delicious that I said to the producers, Blake Hunter and Marty Cohen, I said, can I read another scene? And I ended up reading almost all the scenes that I was in for that show. And I thought, how is it that I have come this far and not been gracious, not been generous, not been acknowledging of everybody's really hard work, mm-hmm. and had disdain for areas of our business that I had no business having disdain for. And we did the show, and as you know, it went for 8 years, and there was just something about the overall lesson of all of that for me that really made a difference, that I started to relate differently, not only in my career, but also in my life. And then when I had done lots of movies of the week. And my manager said to me, Herb Hampshire, who has since passed, Herb said to me, you're going to have to do something different to wake people up to what you can actually, with the other things that you can actually do.
Mhm.
And this play Wit came along. And it was to take over for this brilliant, wonderful, extraordinary actress, Kathleen Chalfant. And I hadn't been on stage in 22 years. I didn't know that I could do this. They said, you can do it in New York, but you have to commit to also doing it on tour in Boston and the Kennedy Center and Florida and San Francisco. And you have to shave your head and be naked on stage. I mean, if the universe doesn't give you a challenge, it's that. And I was, no, I'm not doing this. No, I'm not doing this. And then I read it, and Margaret Edson won the Pulitzer Prize for this play. And I read it, and I was overwhelmed with the brilliance of this piece. And I knew somewhere that I could do it. I knew some of what I could bring to it. And I read it, and I'm weeping at the end of reading this play. And it says, at the last line is, and she removes her baseball cap and her hospital gowns, and she stands naked and beautiful in the light. And I close the play and I go, she is what? And beautiful in the light? She is naked? I said, I can't do this. Well, I did it. And I thought, they'll never give it to me. This is great. I'll go audition. They'll never give it to me. They gave it to me, and I did it. And Daryl Roth, who was one of the producers, and Bernie Telsey, one of the most brilliant casting directors in our business, have become fast friends. And so it was showing me, and it shows to other people, I think, also, that you can change your mind. You can have fear and do something anyway. I was bald for almost a year. You can do these things if you choose it. And those were the things that were my reminders and the guideposts. And it's just that it was, how will I live and who will I be? And that became the top note for all of this. Those are just the stories of the content, but the overall is the who are you? Who are you? And how will you be? Not what will you do, but how will you be? Who will you be?
Do you feel that through all of these experiences that you're reaching that you're the person that you wanted to be when you set those expectations for yourself way back when?
That's a great question. Some days yes, and other days no, because the thoughts that you've had from how you get programmed originally, they don't leave you. You can manage them, you can handle them, but they still come up. And I look at that thought and I say, oh, I see you. I know what that thought is. And I have an easier time disregarding it and not making a choice from it, not coming from it. Yeah. Okay. So it's a more, it has less of a hold on me the way that it did in the beginning.
Okay. And in terms of your career, it's, you've had such an illustrious career. You've been in so many zeitgeist shows, you've been in, plays, theater, films, are there roles that you're looking for, when you're looking at the projects that are coming your way? Are you becoming, even more picky? It's like, obviously you definitely had a mindset early on about what you wanted to do, what you didn't want to do. Has that softened in time in terms of, how you're approaching roles or how you look at projects, as you're starting to look at future roles and things along those lines?
It's so interesting you say that. I certainly don't choose the same way that I did in the beginning. I know now when I see something, things that come to me, I know I can say no to them. That's very clear. Before I was sort of wishy-washy about something, but now I know. And you're right. I've gotten to do some really special things, and so it's like when Chris Kaiser and Daniel Goldfarb brought Julia to me, the show that was on Max, and I knew. They sent me a snippet of what they had written about the character, and a lot of people don't know who Blanche Knopf was. She was the most prolific, important editor and publisher. She was really the head of Knopf Publishing. Her husband Alfred took all the credit for it. She was the one. And so when I read what they wrote, I said, "There's a yes." I mean, you know. And I was getting to work with some really extraordinary people. One of them, Fiona Glasgow, who played Judith Jones in that. And I knew I was going to get directed by Scott Ellis. I mean, who was, a great theater director, as well as a great television director. So I listened to my intuition in a different way. It's like I go, oh yes, that's there. And then when Jeff Astroff brought me Shining Vale, and I knew I was going to get to play Courteney Cox's mom, that there's a there was another high note about women in mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that I wanted to be a part of that. And I knew that I saw how good the writing was. And so, and Courtney's just amazing. I mean, just extraordinary in this. So I knew that these were yeses immediately. Other things I sometimes have harder time with. I look at it and I say, this has possibility, but is this a next step? And I have what I consider a phenomenal team. I have my Alan Nerob and Allison Dangos and Michelle Schwartz and Jamie Aarons, who are my team on my great, phenomenal publicists. And I have great agents in Bob Gersh and Jason Gutman, and I have the Gersh agency, and I have these incredible managers, Ken Lee and Andrea Pet Joseph at Brillstein Wasserman. And I run everything by everybody. So I don't only make the choices myself. I say, listen, everybody, this is how I feel about it. What are your thoughts about it? How does this land in the context of where we're going? Because I feel like I see that I've had this incredible longevity in my career. And so I'm making different choices now based on the longevity and what I'm willing to spend time with. The one that I just finished working with, Billy Crystal, who I love.
Yes.
How much? Oh my God, wait till you see him in this. I can't tell you a lot about it, but I can tell you that this is a dramatic role for him. And I cannot wait for people to see him do this. It's amazing. Amazing. Yeah, it's for Apple Plus. It's pretty remarkable. And, all the stuff that I've gotten to do, Transparent was immediate. I was doing a Broadway show and I got to talk to Joey Soloway, and I was in New York and very happily in New York and flying back and forth whenever I could. And my husband was flying in whenever he could. And I called my manager and I said, oh dear, I think this Transparent could be the thing that brings me back to LA. And in fact, it was. And I just, there are certain things that are immediate yeses.
Yeah. Judith, when you're talking about your team, I think that's something that, building a close environment around yourself and keeping people that you really trust around you has obviously benefited your career, and you trust them based on, what you were just talking about. How did you meet, or how did you build that trust? Because I think with your career, you've had a long career. You've obviously, been in LA, New York, and different worlds under the entertainment banner. A lot of the folks that listen to these podcasts and a lot of our community are just starting out, and how do they choose those people to put around them? How do you evaluate that? Where does that, how do you look at that? Like, what is your perception on that? And what type of advice would you give folks that are trying to put their teams together?
Yeah. it's great. I don't give advice. I don't
Okay.
think I don't think anybody needs advice. Here's what I will tell you that I did
Yeah.
that has been of great value for me, which is I tell them the truth about everything.
Okay.
Everything. I say, this is what I'm looking at, and this is where from where I sit, what I would choose to do. Does this fit into the context of what we are talking about and creating in terms of the longevity of my career and my life? Because the life is really every bit as important, if maybe not more so. If that's the context of the choice, then you have to be clear about that your life and who you are and how you want to live your life is the top note. That's the biggest context. The career fits into that. So if you look at something and you say, oh God, it's the tiniest part, but I get to work with so-and-so, or I get to be here, or I get to have this. Didn't Ellen Burstyn win the Academy Award for some movie she was in for like 3 minutes or something? You can't choose from a mindset of scarcity. You have to choose with what your gut tells you. It's not that you don't use your intellect. I'm not talking about thinking. You got to think. You got to use your intelligence. But you also have to use your heart and your gut. And you have to get quiet enough. And that's what made me start meditating again. It's like you've got to get quiet enough to listen to what the truth is. And like with the wit, the choice of wit, it was like, I really didn't want to be bald for a year. I really didn't want to be naked on stage. I really didn't want to have to learn what I had to learn for that play, which was copious amounts of dialogue. I really, in my head, I didn't want to do it. But in my gut, I knew it was the right thing to do. So sometimes there's always a yes underneath what seems to be a no. So I say to people, this is what I've done. When things don't seem to be going particularly smoothly, or I feel that there's a stagnation, I call everybody up and I say, hello, we're stagnating. That's what I'm feeling. And we know what stagnant water does. It creates, bugs and disease, and we're not going to do that. So, and everybody on this team knows that I talk like that. Everybody knows that we're a team. It's like when I just won the Emmy for Poker Face, which was such a fun job. Right? Oh my God, I had such a good time. I got to work with Apatha Murkison, who I adore. Anyway, what I said was, when I accepted it, I said, we had a tough year for our business last year. It was challenging. Mm-hmm. But everybody on my team made me feel like family. And these were the people that I hold as family. And when you have family, there's a way to speak with them that isn't diminishing, but let's get excited. Let's see what we're going to do together. How can we do this together? Let's keep having this dialogue. So that's how I come to, but I hold them close and I hold them in very high esteem. So it isn't like, hey, you're not getting me these things, what the F is going on? It's like,
yeah.
That's not it. Not a way to talk to anybody. This is we're together in this. Let's get excited about this. And it's like, sometimes I look at something and I go, there was this one particular thing, and Ken said, this is going to be good for you. I said, really? Let me look at it again. So I read it again, and I take everything that they say into account, and I hold them with respect and esteem. And I would say to young people starting out, I would say, look, if you don't feel that way about your people, go somewhere where you feel that way. Because if you can have a true dialogue with somebody you'll know that you'll be able to do that consistently. Also, if you have one of those dialogues and you say, hey, you know, you all, I'm putting a pin in this, so you can always go back and reference it. You can say to your people, you remember that dialogue we had a while ago? This is what I'm talking about. Let's go back and let's revisit this. And no fear, no scarcity. Those things will contract you. The idea is to keep expanding. That's what that's always my choice, is that, will I expand? Will this be of service in some way to the audience that I love, that I so appreciate? Will this excite them? You know, I take them into account as well. It's like, is this going to be something that will be illuminating, elevating, educating? You know, it's not like you want to educate people. It's like, you know, you're entertaining people. It's going to entertain people. You know, it's not like, you know, let's do this really pedantic, didactic thing that we hope you enjoy. It's like, you're entertaining people. You know, you want to make people feel something. You don't watch shows, you feel shows. So it's about a feeling. It's a feeling level, you know.
You've talked a lot about in this call and in research that we did on what you said, respecting your fans, respecting the writers, respecting everyone in the process, and the feeling of responsibility that you have to those fans, to the story, to, you've even talked about, you know, gowns you're wearing on the red carpet, you know, a responsibility to the work that went into that. Do you, and I feel like you stand out in a way that you take that beyond um, with your platform, and you've been very vocal about, you know, HIV and AIDS research, about the LGBTQ community. You talked about it, you know, with Transparent. I mean, I can remember watching the Ryan White story, and, you know, just at the very beginning of, you know, us understanding what AIDS was. So can you talk a little bit about you know, again, why you as a person and you as an actor, you take it beyond what the project is, and you really get involved in feeling the responsibility for some of these topics?
One of the things that I see that we often forget is that we get so closed down in our business, and, you know, what are we wearing, what are we doing, what are we saying? And it's like, I sort of take this aerial view. I look up out in the sky and to the stars, and I look at our planet, and it's this, we're this tiny planet in this huge galaxy. And what is it that makes this important, and this focus of like, I gotta get it right, and I gotta have this, and it's like, out of that, you can diminish yourself and everyone else around you. And we forget that someone spent hours making the gown I'm going to wear. I just was in Washington, D.C., getting an award with John Lithgow, who I adore also. I realize I say that a lot, but I do, that I've had the good grace and the opportunity to work with and love. And I wore this beautiful beaded skirt. And I was like, how many hours did it take somebody to make that? Mm-hmm. That's their creative work. I get to wear it and show it off for them, but they did that they created that. The person who did the alterations on it, that is their creative work. Kevin Erickson, the stylist, brought that to me. That's his creative work. So it's important to remember, just like, it's like, I didn't, you know, people always say when they get an award, it's like, I didn't do this by myself. Well, no kidding. You know, you don't do it alone. I mean, if I don't have a writer writing something, I can't, you know, it's like, that's why we value our writers. That's why it's so wonderful when why actors are in sync with the writers when they strike, so that we support them in getting what is their due. And that doesn't diminish you know, anybody else's work or anybody else's commitment to the business. It's just that when we forget that, and it's so easy to forget it, you get swept up and it's like, oh, people go, oh, this script, oh my God, this script, who wrote this? It's like, you never ever want to do that. You want to remember the aerial view that this belongs to everyone. Nobody wants to write a terrible script, for God's sake. It's like nobody wants to write a terrible scene.
Right.
It's like, it's like, really, it's like, everybody says about the soap opera, it's just a soap opera. It's like, you kidding? That's writing an hour of programming every single day. Are you kidding? Okay, so sometimes it's not, it's not, Henry V, but it's somebody's work, it's somebody's devotion, it's somebody's dedication. So I always do my best to remember that, to remind myself of that. Nobody wants to do a bad job in your makeup. It's like, if you don't like what's happening and it's like, be in conversation with your people to create the character. I can't create that character alone. I need the costume designers. I need the person who's dressing me. I need the wig and the makeup and the hair and it's like, simply to say, you don't do it alone. And the problem that I can see in our business is that we get into this business and we think it's just about us. And there's a narcissism that is prevalent in that. When you hold your crew, whether you're number 1 on the call sheet or number 101 on the call sheet, they want to do their best job. And it is incumbent upon us to remember that everybody is a human being. And this gets done together as teamwork. Everything in our business is teamwork. It's all about the team. So that's, for me, what's important to always remember. Long answer to that. Just wanted to say that I think it's one of the top notes. And, the stuff about HIV and AIDS, we were losing a lot of people in the early days of the disease in the 80s. And that's when I was in the theater and in New York, and we were losing so many people. It was the thing that created Broadway Cares, Equity Fights AIDS, which is one of the most extraordinary organizations. I also saw that, again, this goes back to thinking about other people. There was a level of injustice that was happening around the LGBTQIA+ community that was divisive and disruptive and cruel. And I saw the injustice of that, and I saw people like Elizabeth Taylor, who was speaking out, and I saw other people, Sharon Stone, so many people who were there. I saw the bravery of somebody like Rock Hudson, who came out and said, I have AIDS. And when you see a community where people are so, they see what's happening and they see what needs to be done. I just knew that it was important to say something about, to find a way to support my friends and people that I considered family. And I listened to somebody like Ryan White, who said, I understand people in my town. I understand them being afraid, but I would have been afraid too, but I wouldn't have been cruel. There's this thing that happens where you listen to people like that. And then I saw how impacted Elton John was by Ryan White. And you see it and you say, I want to be counted. Who am I? Who will I be? How will I go back? How will I go back to that? How will I relate? And for some people, they don't want to say anything. And I understand that. And I respect that also. But other people say, you find the thing that in your gut tells you how to speak and where to go. And there were people who said they would never watch me again when I talked about that stuff. And I was like, okay, that's your prerogative. I don't happen to agree with it, but I'm not going to stop talking about it. It's too important. I think we need to speak for each other. And I watched the lesbian community and how they were so supportive of their gay brothers and taking care of them. And it's like when you watch that, the way people relate, despite their fears, and how courageous and they stand up and they care. And there were so many young men who were dying alone in hospitals and they were disowned by their families. It's like, how do you want to relate to that? And so that was a lot of how that came to be. And then my agent, wonderful David Eidenberg, David has since passed. And I called him and I said, David, I want to play Jeannie White. I want to play Jeannie White. And I thought, I'm the girl from Who's the Boss. They're not gonna, but ABC did. They did. And it was remarkable experience. Jeannie was amazing. Ryan was incredible. Andrea, his sister, was beyond. So anyway, so that's how some of that all came to be. Again, it comes under the context of like, who are you going to be?
Right.
How do you want to, who do you want to have any regret when you're on your deathbed? And I just thought, if I don't do this, if I don't do this, I'm going to live with regret. And I can see what other people are doing and I want to model them. I'm inspired by them. I want to model them as best I can.
I know we're almost out of time. I can't believe this has gone so fast. You've been so generous with your time and
What
with
time?
I know with telling our stories but we do love to ask. So we love Blanche and seeing that character, and like you said, you're on Poker Face. I mean, I can't even just start. That whole series is so fantastic. But we love to hear when you do have downtime and when you are taking a break. What do you love to watch or read or podcast listen to? What are you kind of enjoying on your off time right now?
I literally just got back from New York finishing the show with Billy. Um, and now we're in the midst of Emmy considerations. So I'm doing a bunch of stuff and happily being with both of you. So thank you very much for doing this. I read a lot. I'm reading this book now called Super Communicators. And for the life of me, and sadly, I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the author. He won the Pulitzer Prize. And it's very interesting about how to communicate in relationships. And I have a lot of projects that I'm working on and that I'm working to produce. I'm doing that with my husband.
Oh, fun.
And he wrote a novel that was published in 2020. We were about to go on a book tour. Ha ha, good luck on that. Right, right. But he has written another novel and he's in the process of having that published. And we have these really viable, valuable, informative projects that we're working on. And we have different placements and different teams that we're working with to get these out. So I'm really excited about those, and that's taking up a lot of my time, a lot of the meetings. I'm looking at a lot of other projects that the agents and the managers are bringing to me, and I'm looking at what those might be. And I love to cook, so I'm doing some cooking. Although I've been leaving a lot of that to Robert because he's really super great. Getting to see again, he is, oh my God, he's like he's and getting to see friends, people that I haven't had time to see. And so we're doing some of that. And I was just trying to think of some of the other things. I love to read. And watching. Oh my God, have you seen Somebody Somewhere? My son, Jay Duplass, who played my son on Transparent.
Yes.
Have you seen it?
Yes. I
Take all
didn't
these down.
remember the name, but when you said Jay, yes.
Oh my God. Oh my God. It's so amazing. Bridget Everett. Oh my God. The whole show. Fabulous. Have you seen Ripley?
We've had so many people talk about it. I started the first episode and it
Oof.
is so good. And
dark.
how many times can we see that story? It is so phenomenal again.
Steven Zalian has done an entirely different take on this. It's just remarkable.
Yes. And
Seen,
Andrew Scott, oh, I
have you
love it so
have you
much.
I know, have you seen A Small Light that
No.
Tony and Joan Rader have done? You've got to see it.
Okay.
It's on Hulu, I think now, maybe.
Okay.
You got to see it. It was on Nat Geo. Bless Nat Geo for putting it out first. It's
Okay.
amazing. And have you seen Thomas Cale, who was the gentleman who brought me back to Broadway in a play with my dear friend Dan Lauria called Lombardi? And he directed Hamilton, lest we all forget his incredible brilliance. Tommy has done, his friend Georgia Hunter wrote a book called We Were the Lucky Ones.
Yes. We had
You,
Georgia on the podcast.
you
Oh,
see this.
yes, we have seen it. Oh,
Yeah.
It's beyond.
Yeah.
It's beyond. I wrote to Tommy the other day. I said, I'm obsessed. I'm addicted. Could you please put these out faster? And of
Yeah.
course, he's never going to give them to me. It's like, I have to wait. I wait and wait. Just saw Mary and George with Julianne Moore.
Oh, yes, yes.
Starz.
Well,
And
we have to we need to be introduced to Tommy, because you have sung his praises when we had Georgia and Erica Lippitz on the podcast. Tommy brought them together. They didn't know each other before.
because
And yes, we need to meet Tommy. He's this phenomenal person we don't know.
He is beyond.
Yeah.
He is
Yeah.
he is the link to so many pieces.
That's what everyone says. They said he gets people. It's like the matchmaker.
He's the one who introduced me to Lin-Manuel Miranda, and Lin put me tick tick boom. I mean, you're talking about, we know these people that it's the thing I love about producing, which is you put people together.
Yeah.
When you put people together, you have this really sort of glorious, because intuitively, we're talking about intuition, that these people they're almost from the same soul pod, is what I would call it. They know each other. They've all incarnated together.
Yes.
So like, I felt that way about Chris Kaiser and Daniel Goldfarb. It's the same thing. I mean, Chris and I have been friends for 100 years. We've done a lot of political stuff together. So it's like, when you have those people and then they operate in the way that I was talking about before, which is the generosity, the kindness, the familial, the family, the texture, the holding together of the team, that the project is going to be glorious. That's why Julia is such an amazing project. It's so beautiful. It's like, and they took the stance that this was going to be about the women who were around Julia Child. I mean, amazing. Ryan Murphy, impeachment. Let's talk about the women who are around the Clinton issue, about what happened with Monica Lewinsky. So there are these creators out there that are talking about how women are being related with and who they all are together, and they create these teams. And I've been very fortunate to be a part of that. The same thing with Jeff Astroff and Shining Vale, women and mental illness. Let's all talk about it. Let's see what that means to all of us and to the people who watch us.
Right. And putting these amazing actors together. I love that. I love those stories.
You tell Georgia, tell Erica, who's also a genius, both of them.
Yes.
That you need to talk to Tommy, and if you need me to back up, I back that up.
We're getting Judith on the case if you guys don't do
it. Well, you will adore him. He's funny and brilliant and amazing and wonderful, and he's one of my family. So
I love that.
Really delicious.
Well, thank you so much for the time today, Judith. It was such a pleasure. It's like Angela Bauer was like the first woman I watched as like a leading woman in a working world. And, so this has been surreal a little bit for me. So
thank you.
I just want to say something about that. We didn't know at the time. We knew that it was a reversal role. We knew that, very feminist idea at the time. But we didn't know how many young women like you were impacted in a way that changed the trajectory of their lives. They saw and were inspired by that story. And ABC really did do an incredible job on that. I was in the airport a few weeks ago, and there was a woman across from me, and she said, I've got this big advertising business now because I watched Angela Bauer. We had no idea at that time. So what you're saying and your experience is reflected in so many young women who I've had the good fortune to meet, and now you. So thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe and leave a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. To stay up to date with In Her Words, join the conversation by following Women in Entertainment on our social channels and subscribe to our weekly newsletter at womeninentertainment.com.